Right now, I'd like to switch our focus for a few minutes to Mr. Welton, representative of Nautel, and all that is coming out of Canada, except you can keep the cold. Yeah. Uh,
Hey, like I said earlier, it's 40 degrees here, so relative to a lot of the places down there, we're doing all right now.
Jeff has been with Nautel, was it 36 years now? 37?
Thir 34.
34.
Yeah, I'm
Well,
still a rookie. It's funny because we were doing a plant tour for some folks in November, December, and standing there, I'm talking to our production supervisor, our procurement manager, and my boss, Wendell, in sales. And I was the rookie, the junior one of the four of us.
yeah, I remember Wendell all the way back to 82 when I first met him.
Yep.
So anyway, Jeff has been on both sides of the show, if you want to say. He was customer service support for a long time. Now he's out as the district manager for half the country. And if you ever need help from Nautel, you can always call Jeff W., as they say.
You can call either Jeff W. The other Jeff W.'s in the audience. So we're still arguing about taking Jeff at Nautel.com as the U.S. sales address, and then we'll just argue about who takes care of everything that comes into that address.
All right, there you
Won't be
go.
much of an argument, I don't think. We've done it pretty easily. I everything east of the Mississippi is me, except for Minnesota and Louisiana, which straddle, and then everything west is Mr. Wilson. But anyway, yeah, no, and when you asked what to talk about, and what brought it to mind, and anybody that hangs around Facebook, and we've had that discussion already, but knows my opinion about cell phones in general and one specific brand in specific. And so I ordered a new cell phone at Christmas or shortly before, end of November. And the local ISP got it out the door. I mean, they were fast. It was shipped less than 2 days after I ordered it. But it was 3 weeks before I finally got it. And the story of the delivery company was it was just an exercise in trying patience. So, that's when I kind of learned, and that's what I told you when we were swapping emails about this the other day. It's like the whole catching flies with honey. And, I worked my way up to tier three support with the ISP, with the cell company. And the gal at tier three support, we started the conversation. I said, look, I said, I've worked support and I know this isn't your fault. I'm going to vent a little, but I need you just to sit back from the microphone, let me get it out of my system. And then I said, and then we can start to solve the problem. And so I told her what was going on with this shipping company because it's one of these, I can't describe it. Well, okay, I can't describe it. So the company that the delivery company was the delivery people for the newspaper, the local newspaper. And of course, news subscriptions had gone down. So the newspaper company said, well, you know what we should do? We're used to delivering newspapers all over. Why don't we just start couriering? And apparently, delivering newspapers is much easier than delivering packages or something. But 2 weeks later, when I haven't got a phone, I called the ISP and I said, look, I know it's not your fault. You shipped it, but I need a phone and I need this fixed. So what do we do? And she's like, can you give me a day or two to look? And so I gave her, and I said, understand it's been 2 weeks. But anyway, so we go through the process. And at the end of it, she's like, you're the easiest person I've had to deal with because they had a pile of these calls, of course. The delivery company's not just screwing up my stuff, they're screwing up everybody's stuff. And Canada Post was on strike at the time, so the phone company made the somebody in middle management probably made the decision to go with the cheapest option instead of a known entity. And that whole "you get what you pay for" line. It does hold true at times. But anyway, so when I got through the tier three support lady, she was quite sympathetic. She tried everything she could do. She tried to reach out to the delivery company. Next day, she says, would you have an issue with driving half an hour to your nearest Eastlink store to pick up a new phone? And I said, no, at this point, I would not. I mean, especially if you're going to ship me a replacement by the same company, then no, I'll go get it myself. So she says, okay, well, the phone will be there when you get there anytime more. As she says, I'll email you the agreement. And as soon as that agreement hits your inbox, you can go to the store to get the phone. So wasn't 45 minutes later, the agreement hit my inbox. I go to the store to get the phone. And I'm fully expecting to have to argue with them about setup charges and all this stuff because if you order online, there's no setup charge. If you involve people, then they're charging you for their labor. But anyway, so the tier three support gal not only credited the all the setup fees, and she did that in advance with a purchase credit. She canceled the existing order and canceled any billing on that, which of course I'd expect nothing less. But she also put $100 credit on my first bill. And so, or first however many bills. But I got the bill and it's like, oh, wow, I can talk for a long time before I run out of this. So that was one of those. And and that was what made me think of this topic because we deal with all kinds of folks and folks are stressed. Harold wants to know if the original phone's still on its way and the big. So I'll just get to that in a very quick second, but that's a good point. The so the point I was getting to with this was that that the all she had to do was cancel the original phone and get me a replacement, whether shipped or picked up. And if I opted to pick it up, they could have gone hardline and just had me pick up the $60 admin fee. So she opted not to do that. The extra credit was 100% just unasked, unrequested bonus. And that's the kind of thing most support folks have a fair bit of leeway in what level of support they give you. And, it works the same with sales guys, to be brutally honest. If we're talking on the phone and we have a really good conversation and it's a really good time, the discount will usually be a percent or two higher than if you caused me undue stress and anxiety. So that was just one of those little side notes that sometimes when we get stressed, it's hard to remember that the person on the other end of the phone isn't the direct cause of all your problems.
You're sort of like a waitress that goes to a restaurant and has dinner and tips the server well
Yeah,
because that's what she does for a living.
right. And remember, I'm from the land of $15 minimum wage, and we don't have the weird rules you guys got for below minimum wage tipping for servers. And I mean, that's a whole different economic argument that doesn't apply here. But yeah, I mean, same deal. I tend to try, and it's like I told my wife. She's like, "You were a lot politer than I would have been," and it's like, look, I get that the frontline people. She's not the one that took the order. She's not the one that screwed up the delivery. She's absolutely not working for the delivery company that has nobody. And this is it. The delivery company, zero contact. They had an email address, no phone numbers, no personal presence, no way to reach a human. They had live chat that no matter what time of day you clicked on it said, please contact us during business hours. And apparently their business hours were midnight to midnight 01 or something like that. But yeah, there was no way to reach a live human being. And so I did what any other person in the internet age would do. I gave them a 1-star review on Google, a 1-star review on Welp, and a 1-star review on Facebook. And of course, made absolutely zero difference. But oh, and so Harold asked if the Canada Post strike ended. It did. It ended a couple of days before Christmas, I think. The one thing it taught us, a month and a half of Canada Post being on strike, was exactly how little we really require Canada Post. Because other than one magazine that I get through postal mail, we get absolutely nothing by postal mail. Odd Amazon shipment. So yeah, that kind of and that's a whole different thing. I mean, Canada Post, the union was pushing for a 24% raise from a company that lost a grand total of $500 million in 2024. And it's like, when your company's hemorrhaging money that fast, it's the wrong time to be asking for more of it.
Well,
But
that's what you would think. Now it's
anyway,
interesting too. We got Jeff Fairbairn on online with us this afternoon, and over in England they don't do tipping at all. Well,
mhm.
they round up to the next pound sometimes, but it's not like in this country, which has got out of hand, and we could have a whole discussion about these machines that now want 30% tips and things
Yeah,
like.
well, and that's like I say here, we've adopted the U.S. tipping culture, but we still have the minimum wage law that says any server in any restaurant is making minimum. Well, in Canada, it's currently or in Nova Scotia, it's 14.75 an hour. I think it's supposed to go to 15.25 in April.
Well, let's
But
transition. Let's transition from telephones and Christmas presents and shippers to broadcast a little bit, shall we?
well, I'm going to jump right back in a moment because Harold had asked if the original phone was still on its way, and this again to emphasize the level of service from this automated shipping company. 3 days after I went to the store and got the replacement phone, and Eastlink had canceled the original order, I got an email from the shipping company saying they're still working with Eastlink to figure out how to get my phone to me.
Uh,
So yeah, the original phone may or may not be still on its way. I'm just glad I'm not the phone company that has to figure out how to get all these phones back.
I'll counter
It,
that with an article
yeah.
with the experience. I got an Epson Echo Tank 4850.
Hmm.
I had a problem with it, and so I called them up, and they sent me another one, and I'm sitting here with and do I send this one back? No, we don't want it back. And then a third one shows up. They're just, and Jeff, you've had that reputation, and now everybody knows that you used to drive around the area with all kinds of parts in your vehicle, and you came down to help people, and you were pretty liberal with what you'd leave behind.
Yeah, I mean, and that's like I say, that's when I sent you the original email. I said the topic should be catching more flies with honey.
So how do we do that? How do we do that? How can we get the best out of Jeff and his cohorts? Um, you mentioned an experience here about a customer with a problem transmitter.
So, and it did be a good example because and I mean, I like the guy, I really do, and I know he's under pressure. But if you start the conversation off with this lemon transmitter at a site that I've been to that I can tell you there is zero grounding on, and I actually use it as a poster child for how not to do this in a lightning protection presentation, then the odds are the conversation is not going to go. There's not going to be as many free stuff left behind as there would be otherwise. But yeah, that was kind of part of what set it off. I mean, there are certain things that we have to do by law these days, and you can thank Wayfair versus the state of South Dakota for that one. I think it was the vice versa, South Dakota versus Wayfair. But a lot of companies are starting to have to charge state sales tax. Whereas it used to be before, if you bought something from out of state, they didn't charge you the sales tax. Theoretically, it was up to you to remit the sales tax on your own. And some did, some didn't. That's a judgment call that I'm not prepared to get into. But since the state of South Dakota sued Wayfair for sales tax on all sales to consumers in South Dakota, every other manufacturer and shipper has said, yeah, we don't want to be part of that game. So now we charge state tax into just about every state that we have Nexus in, as an example. Now, in a lot of states, and his would be an example, broadcasters are exempt. In his particular state, broadcasters are exempt, but they're required to either provide their I forget what it's called, purchaser tax number, basically like a federal tax number, but on the state level. Or they have to provide a single use certificate indicating that they are a registered broadcast entity in the state of blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's not a big deal to us. Well, we sent them an invoice for a whole bunch of parts to fix this lemon transmitter. And we charge sales tax because we didn't have that particular form. And he came back and I said, yeah, we need this form. Well, no, you don't. There's no form. And we fought about it. I ended up calling the state tax bureau and getting them to send me the documentation. And then I sent it to him with the contact information, and we still fought about it. So sometimes you can be your own worst enemy, and I've done it before too. But so getting back to broadcast, I know one of the things we do that frustrates a lot of people is we request serial numbers a lot. And of course, the serial number is buried on the back of the transmitter, which may be at the top of a mountain and may not be easy to see. We fixed that in the new AUI, which is in the VX and in the new GVs, and slowly, oh my God, so slowly rolling out. But that's a discussion on how support could be doing better, not customers. But we've provided the option to plug your serial number into your user interface so you can actually just connect to your transmitter and see the serial number. Anyway, we ask that because, of course, transmitters move. They go site to site, frequency to frequency, call signs change. The serial number is the one thing that we can be constant or confident what box we're looking at. And if I've got that serial number, then I can go back into our files and tell you every component that we shipped in that transmitter. And I know we've brought this up before talking about documentation, and I know Grady, I've taken him on a tour of the plant, and he's seen the library where we keep the manuals for everything we've ever built. Still have it. But but yeah, I mean that's the kind of thing. Like the service folks are going to start with asking stupid questions. And they're going to ask the stupid questions for two reasons. Number one, to make sure that they know what equipment they're talking about. And number two, they're trying to get a fix on the level of competence of the person on the other end. Because I had a guy swear up and down he knew what he was doing. And we talked over and over, and I'm trying to tell him to do, and he's like, "Don't stop talking to me like I'm an idiot." And then very cheerfully put his hand under an exciter and hit a 120 volt outlet with his fingertips. And it's like, tried to tell you there was another circuit breaker. But yeah, so I had one guy call me once, and he goes, "Yeah," he goes, "I'm going to need you to use the small words because I'm translating for my wife who's doing the work because I'm too drunk to touch the transmitter." And it's like, yep, this call is over right now. I mean, so there are going to be a lot of dumb questions as we try to figure out what level we're dealing with. And once we get to that point, a lot of folks don't read the script and say, we don't have a script. If we did, I would have written it. And I guarantee we don't have a script. But that's the kind of thing. Just a whole lot there. The customer service guy in me just got to do a whole lot of ranting. But yeah, just be patient. The other thing, we've got a bunch of old guys who know a lot of stuff, but we've got some new folks coming in and they're learning. So be patient when you can. They will reach out if they need help. So, thoughts, Ken? I know you've dealt with our service a bunch of times. I'm gonna put you on the spot because you haven't called me to growl about a transmitter in so long. I'm really starting to miss it.
Well, I retired 2.5 years ago,
I
so
know, I know. Now he just calls me to send me pictures of cats and dogs and radios.
well, I just want to make sure your neighbors aren't eating your cats and dogs.
I'm a little far north and east of that, but
Oh, okay.
yeah. But now, I
Oh, I
mean,
always
so
got excellent service from you guys. Sometimes I remember the one biggest deal was we had the 10 the LP10 light,
mhm.
and you had a guy in Denver I was dealing with,
That would have
and I
been
had sent a
Joey,
module in who?
Joey Kloss.
I guess that was his
It's
name.
the only guys we had in Denver, Joey Kloss, and actually Mike Pappas handled support for us for a little while too. He's now VP of Development for Orban.
Okay. Well, it seemed like it was more like Robbie or something like that. Anyway, I saw him at one of the TABs. You introduced me to him, but we spent a lot of time on this, and I'd sent the module in and they sent it back, and I plugged it in and it blew up. And so he's on the line when I get it back this next time. And he says, okay, throw the breaker, throw the little breakers down at the power supplies. Now plug it in. Now don't turn it on. Turn the breakers back on. Now switch that module on. Boom. He goes, oh, I heard that.
Yep.
And so he ends up, we take that thing apart. And over on the right side, you've got the 4 little amplifiers sitting there. Then there's just kind of a blank panel.
Mm-hmm.
Behind that blank panel is all your hybrid combining and stuff like that.
Right.
And so I ended up having to pull all that out. And he says, now take out this module, now unscrew all the screws and open it up. And what do you see? And I said, a bunch of burned up parts. And I said, we've spent nearly $20,000 on this $44,000 transmitter that went out of warranty last month.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, yeah, he says, I'll see what kind of a deal. And he did work out a deal and everything. But the one thing that I never found out, and it's 2 things I never found out from you guys. This is in the middle stage of the transmitter. So this is the output of the 4 amplifiers going in, and their drive is being divided there. And then it goes through the output stage to the antenna.
Mm-hmm.
I said, what caused this? There's nothing down at this stage that could have burned that up. And he says, well, it must have been lightning. I said, it would have burned up something in the output stage on its way down to there.
That depends. The output stage, so the output power probe is a strip line coupler. There's no physical connection in the power probe to the actual output connector. The output filter is pretty much, we use the same 3 dB filter for everything to 20 kilowatts and lower, or 3 dB combiner. So it's pretty oversized at that power level. The 4-way combiner that combines the power modules would be the one, and the reject load resistors are where you tend to see it, because at the module, if one of them goes out, then the reject load resistors see a whole lot of stress. So yeah, no, that stage, and I mean, it's rated for 12 kilowatts continuous, but if you dump enough voltage back, that's where I'd expect to see the failure happen first after the module blows up. So,
well, he took
not
care of
impossible,
it,
but yeah, and this comes back to like this other one I was talking about. I mean, in their case, their antenna is on the tallest tower on the tallest hill anywhere around. So it gets all the lightning. Its ground connection is a piece of soft drawn 6-gauge copper hose clamp to the leg of the tower and then hose clamp to a ground rod. And then the transmitter is connected by another piece of 6-gauge to a different ground rod. The AC is connected to a different ground rod, and that one's just twisted, hand twisted. And none of the twain shall meet. None of them are connected together, and no surge protector. So in their case, yeah, their transmitter and their, with them, it is all supplies and amplifiers. And we've told them it's like, you need to fix the site, but
well, my
hopefully
side,
it'll get done.
it was 100 yards from the tower,
Mm-hmm.
buried transmission line. And I'd put all the big loops all around the outputs like y'all recommend, the ferrites.
Yep.
And we didn't see anything. I took the line apart. There wasn't marks or anything, but we got it all taken care of, and he got the bill knocked way down. So I appreciated that.
Good.
But him being on the phone when it went pop helped, I think.
First time, old 60 kilowatt XL60. The first ones we built had, all the ones we built had a reset button on them, and each power module had a reset button on it, because there was an IGBT that could clamp to, theoretically, its purpose was that if you saw a big enough surge or a short come down the line, that the overcurrent would blow a fuse and the IGB would clamp to bypass, basically the IGB clamped to below the fuse to protect the modulator. What typically happened was that the 40 amp stovepipe type slow blow fuses that we use, those paper cartridge fuses, had such a long trip curve that you could run them with an 800% overload for several seconds before they'd fail. So the IGBT would clamp, it would immediately blow open. So, to protect the fuse, basically. At that point, the fuse is out of the circuit, then the modulator would fail. But when the IGBT itself failed, it went off like a shotgun shell. And I was working on what used to be the Crawford XL60 in Albany, the old WPTR WDCD site, and had a couple of amplifiers trip. Well, what used to happen if you hit a reset and you had a shorted modulator, it would immediately fail that IGBT. And it did it in the most explosive fashion possible. And that was a real, that was our version of an FM25K or whichever, the broomstick transmitter. But we used to call that reset button the press to destroy button. And they finally fixed that so that the bypass circuit did what it was supposed to do. It was just a lot of timing and replacing the fuse. But yeah,
Jeff,
audible alerts are a very very good thing to point you toward the source of the problem.
in manufacturing, Jeff, how
Yeah.
how often, how easy or hard is it to make those changes in product that you discover from the field?
Depends on the specifics. I mean, for every new transmitter that we develop, there will usually be for the first 10 or 20 or 30 customers, you'll get a field mod saying, hey, do this or do that, something that we discovered and fixed in the field.
Okay.
On the rare occasion, and less so now, more so in the older days when a lot of this was newer technology to us, well, solid state AM was newer technology to everybody 40 years ago. But a lot of those back in those days, it wouldn't be uncommon for somebody like me to end up on an airplane flying to every single customer, running through a list of 10 or 20 field upgrades. These days, we will still do that if we really need to, but for the most part, the bulk of it can be done by the end user. And like and this comes back to a conversation you and I've had before, where we'll send a field mod kit, a little plastic bag with some components and a sheet of instructions. And, I'll be wandering by a site 20 years later and see a nice little cardboard box full of little plastic bags full of components and sheets of instructions. I happened to cross that at a site in, I don't want to get too specific on location, central Canada. Let's go with central to western Canada. But I was there to do something else and ended up going through the list and picking the ones that were most critical to operation and installing them. And it's a testament to the overall site layout that they had not blown that transmitter up repeatedly because none of those field upgrades had been installed.
I think the only real, I mean, this is such a petty little complaint, but if I'm asked to come down and look over someone's shoulder or offer some comments, sometimes the problem is the manual. Now, I've told the story when I got started as a full-time engineer. I had a problem with a Gates transmitter, Harris 7.5K, and I discovered that my manual was not the same as the parts of the transmitter.
Mm-hmm.
And I called the tech support guy, and then we talked. He pulls his book out. We discovered his book didn't match my book, which did match the transmitter.
Yep. And I mean, look at I'll pick the AmFET 50 and picking on Grady again just because I know he and that WALE AmFET 50 had a history. But there were 4 different major revisions of that transmitter, which means 4 different manuals. And the field support guys typically have 1 or 2 manuals, so the one they have may not match the exact one you've got. Now, beyond that, and again, the AmFET 50, that transmitter we built from 1984 to 1990. I think I tested the last one right after I started. But in that 6-year period, beyond those 4 major revisions, and again, this was our first 50 kilowatt solid state, and 84 might have been the first. I don't remember. It might not have been. I think the original DX50 predated that by a few years. But either way, I mean, we made several minor revisions. So depending what board you're looking at, there absolutely could have been a variation. And every transmitter we shipped used to go out the door with about 10 or 20 pink pages in the front of the handbook that were meant to be installed throughout the handbook to replace the original pages from the mass-produced book. And like the field mods, a lot of times those did not necessarily get installed.
Well, now, of
Um,
course, there's no manual. We've come to this part of society where it's all PDF files, and
and Howard, or Harold rather, brings a really good advantage of that up there, because now we can update the manual per transmitter. And you can go onto our website and we will ask you for the specific rack configuration of your transmitter. And you can download the manual that is exact for your transmitter model.
yes,
So,
but now suppose you get a call from somebody, a,
uh-huh,
a program director or a disc jockey. They're
right,
they're off the air.
uh-huh,
And yes, I like the fact that with the newer transmitters, you can pull the serial number up. But I get a phone call from this guy. He's got a VS, whatever it is, and
right,
you've got 8 generations of manuals.
uh-huh.
Which one?
The worst case scenario, if you haven't already done that in the past, then you reach out to tech support, because I will go into this thing here no matter where I am, get into our database, look up your serial number, look up your work order, look up the exact manual, and then tell you. So that's easy to do. By the same token, again, if you're taking the serial number for anything that you do on a contract basis on a regular, for not for the first time, then you can jotting down the model number, the rack number at the same time is useful. Whatever, again, model number, serial number.
Well, that's what I'm
So,
getting at. Trying to help the tech support guy
yeah,
to do his job. The more
serial number is
data
the
you've got,
critical
the
thing.
better.
Right. And if you've got serial number, we can figure out the rest. And I say, I mean, we use Salesforce, so I've got that in my phone. As far as that goes, I've got OneDrive in my phone, and every manual for everything we've done in PDF format, I've got access to directly from my phone.
Now, you
Harder to,
demonstrated some of that for us a couple months ago.
yep.
Do I remember whether the actual station can access any of that?
The actual station can only download the manuals, by creating a user group. They don't have access to our customer database. We've talked about that. There are security implications, and these days, IT security being what it is at
Well,
most
yeah.
radio stations, there are some things that we'd prefer not to have in there. Let's see, none of the manufacturers really want station engineers to know how things work or how to fix it in the field. That's not necessarily incorrect, Bill. That's that, as much as I hate to say it, and there's a reason for that. We've got two levels of field engineer, and when I say field engineer, I mean customer level. And prime example would be the phone call I took right before we started this. That the guy calling me was the engineer slash sales manager slash product program manager, and he got zero engineering training and not a whole lot of experience. Is basically, he fixes stuff when it breaks to the level that it needs to be fixed to get it back on the air. Used to be that those calls were the vast minority, maybe 5% of our customer base, and the other 95 were folks that had been doing engineering for years and knew what they were about, or had been mentored or were being mentored. These days, those kind of customers make up well over half of our customer base. It's not safe for most of the people that we deal with to be touching stuff any more than they need to. And yeah, so we absolutely do try to limit that. Some of it, like with switching power supplies, that's just what do you call it? A side effect of when you OEM something out, you lose control over how much documentation you get and can provide. And that sucks. And, I don't know the best solution to that. We could go back to designing switching supplies, but we'd have to jack up the prices on the gear. So that was a compromise that came with, by the same token, how many folks do surface mount solder repair? It's Not a lot. There are some. I mean, I know most of the Crawford engineers do. And see, now this is a cart and a horse question, Bill. And Bill, do you got a microphone? Because I mean, this is a cool conversation, and you're not you're not telling me you're preaching to the choir. Let's put it that
Oh,
way.
okay. Well, I have a
Um,
microphone. I don't know whether Barry will let me talk.
Sure.
no, no, absolutely, bring it on. But yeah, you're right. It is, and you say self-fulfilling, but it's a cart horse situation. We started to go that way as we started to see fewer trained, experienced engineers in the field, and we're trying to ultimately reduce the load on our service staff.
Oh yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, if they blow up more stuff than they fix, then that's a
Or if them fixing it requires 4 calls to support, whereas me telling you to swap out this module requires one,
yeah.
then again, you're right. It's definitely a balancing act. And it's something that sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it wrong, and we learn every time. So you're right. Give us the feedback on stuff like that. And I know you
It,
have before.
it's a sliding scale too. I mean, some of the
Hmm.
stuff that is prosumer, like CD players, that oh no, we can't sell you the $40 replacement CD drive that is installed with 2 screws and a plug. But we'll be happy if you send your unit back to the factory. We'll turn it around in a couple of months for $300.
Yeah. And
And it's
you're
not so bad. I
talking
mean,
about an HD multicast or an exporter plus, I'm guessing.
well, no, I mean, this is our continuing drama
Hmm.
with anything that air talent touches is you know
Yeah.
broken soon. If you can keep the transmitter and the air talent apart, then you're ahead of the game,
Yeah.
um, generally.
Yeah, and I
So
mean, so Paul made a good comment in the chat, and that's very much something that concerns us. Is if you're just going to blow up a transmitter by screwing something up, that's not a big deal to me. But if you can hurt yourself, like the guy
yeah,
called me too drunk to work on the transmitter, then that's a much bigger deal. So yeah, I've managed. I told somebody once that I've managed in 34 years not to kill anybody while I was on the phone with them. And I do a safety presentation where I put up a slide of 3 people, engineers that I did know who are all passed away, and every single one of them was found at the transmitter site. So you know that's you're right. It's frustrating for the folks that do know how to fix stuff. The problem is the bar is getting lower and lower every year, and
yeah.
there's a liability plus safety issue.
I'm just too old is the problem, Jeff. I remember when every single thing that you
You almost
got
got a full service
in a
manual.
radio
I mean,
station, you got
you bought a cordless phone from Radio Shack, you'd get a full service manual with
you
schematics
get
in
you
it.
get schematics, you get a theory of operation, you'd get
Hmm.
troubleshooting tips, and a list of parts, and you
And
could
we
get all
still
the
do
parts.
that. I mean, to a lesser scale on our end, but we still, you'll get the wiring lists, you'll get what wire goes where, what parts are in there. There are some things like the bought out power supplies that we do not. Single board computers where we're just buying a fixed hardware computer board. We're not going to give you the component level for that because we don't have it. But
Yeah,
anything that we build, you'll have schematics and parts lists.
yeah. I
So,
got I got VS 2.5
mhm.
serial number 6 or something.
And the problem with the VS 2.5 is the
Power
entire
supplies.
transmitter is,
Well,
well, yeah, so the power supplies, and that's one of those situations where we I mean, we have this thing called continuous improvement. Basically, if something becomes obsolete, we don't abandon it. We continually support it, which means instead of abandoning the VS series when those UG69, the Tectrol supplies, because Tectrol went out of business. So instead of abandoning the whole product line, we made it reverse upgradable so you could go to the current supplies. The downside is that's expensive. And I expect that's where you're going. But yeah, it's a big challenge. And Chris makes a good comment in here. Like, I know if I'm talking to one of Crawford's engineers that I've got a specific level of engineering skill. If I'm talking to Joe Blow from Pawtucket, I may or may not have that. Sorry, Pawtucket. I learned how to say it right last fall, but that may be a different level of skill. And you're right. We play 20 questions to find this stuff out. And I know, especially when you get the GM calling every 5 minutes to ask how long you're going to be off the air, that gets frustrating. So yeah, a little patience helps. But you're right.
You got to do some management.
Expectation management is what we call it in sales, but exactly what it is. Yep. So, and I see Wilson in here talking stuff in as far as RTFM, and that I had a guy call me one day, and I'm in the middle of stuff. I took about probably an hour, 2 hours to get back to him. Well, I've been on vacation since middle of December, so my hour to 2 hours is closer to a day or two now. But I'll be back to work on Monday, and we'll try to get that time down after I figure out how to deal with the pile. But I've had people tell me on the phone, yeah, I call you guys because it's easier than opening the manual. And, that's the kind of attitude that we're seeing more and more. That's the kind of attitude that caused the automation suppliers to go to paid support. And we're not doing that, but I can guarantee you the conversation comes up at least once a year. So, that's just kind of that sort of thing. But anyway, yeah, I think the big takeaway is if you've got the call sign and the serial number and a reasonable description of what you've experienced beyond it don't work, then it makes it a whole lot easier. And then just let the service guy ask the questions so he can build the picture in his head based on what they're familiar with. Let's see, Ray's got, and there's the issue. So we had a dedicated power supply engineer up till probably about 10, 12 years ago. John retired a while back, but I asked him one day when we first started using the tech trolls, I said, why are we buying these? And he said, well, I could design one that would do the same thing and just as reliably, but it'd be either 10 times as big or cost 10 times as much, or both. So it's, let's see, if it's solid state, the voltage is only 5 volts. Rich, not true. So a power amplifier can be 70 to 400 volts, depending on the amplifier rail. And I guarantee you 400 volts DC will get your attention.
It has in the past.
Yeah. Take it 50 kilowatt solid state AM, one of the older ones where we did only run 70 volts DC. That's 70 volts at upwards of 2000 amps peak current. So you've got a really effective arc welder at that point as well.
Or a ball lightning generator.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of cool reasons why we tend to pay attention to this stuff. All right, we hit the top of the hour. Real Boss is upstairs waiting for me to do something. Like I said, I am burning vacation time this week. So anybody got any other thoughts? I kind of rambled on for half an hour and didn't let anybody speak much at all.
Well, I just wanted to, as long as I got your ear, I went back to my old stomping grounds to help Lyndon Duke with a problem with the other station in the diplex.
Mm-hmm.
I said, there's a weird problem with this XR here, because he knew I'd been there when it went in.
Right.
I looked at it. I think it was like clipping the positives or something weird was going on. I said, well, Lynn, I've never encountered this, but I said, I'd really suggest that you call Noctel's tech support and talk to them because, and the next time I saw him, he said, oh, by the way, they were great at Nautel. I knew exactly what to do. And the only question I had unanswered about the incident was, how did that adjustment get screwed up in the first place?
I'm going to say, because it
wasn't Lynn, because he never touched it, but somebody did.
Was it single phase or 3-phase? The XR.
Yeah, power three-phase.
Yeah, that was a 50, right, Chris?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, so that one, your only two options are they ran out of power supply because somebody had set the threshold wrong, or somebody had flipped the audio phase.
It would probably says it's probably the former.
Hmm.
But he put their greenie where they probably shouldn't have.
Yeah, and that's why the running joke when we first built the NV series in 2009, 8, something like that. We used to, I mean, back in the day, every transmitter we ever shipped, you opened the door and there was a little metal clip with a tweaker tool in it for adjusting the pots. You know, well, we put that same tweaker tool into the NV series, but the joke was there wasn't any pots in the transmitter at all. So you got a tweaker tool and nothing to tweak. But that transmitter's cool. This is a little side note, Easter egg clue. If you have one of the original NV series FMs and you pull the back cover off, you'll see the power supply control board back there. And there's a little indicator light, basically a CPU clock cycle light. And if you watch it, it's blinking erratically. And if you pay attention, you'll discover it's blinking Nautel and Morse code. So there you go. Easter egg for anybody that happens to encounter an older NV series.
Well, Jeff, thanks for coming by.
My pleasure, folks.